Taliban groups have captured the key northern city Afghan of Kunduz after fierce fighting with the government forces. Wildfires still burn out of control in Greece as thousands flee. And South Africa begins a nationwide vaccination campaign for homeless people against COVID-19. Hello and welcome to teleSUR. I'm José Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. Taliban groups have captured the key northern city of Kunduz, one of the largest in Afghanistan, after fierce fighting with government forces. A provincial council member, Ghulam Rabbani, said fighting between insurgents and government forces had taken place around the governor's office and police headquarters, and later the Taliban had taken over the two buildings. They also had control of the main prison building in Kunduz. At the moment, fighting is continuing at the airport and other parts of the city. Kunduz is in a strategic crossroads with good access to much of northern Afghanistan, as well as the capital, Kabul.
We informed the Council about grave human rights violations in Afghanistan happening. We see the Taliban in area they're capturing, their summary killings, executions, as well as chopping of hands, stoning to death, and very egregious, the graphic of which would be very difficult to even show here to the media. These are violations of international human rights law, international humanitarian laws, and some of these will amount to war crime. So we expect the Council to step in and take immediate action.
The United Nations envoy to Afghanistan, Deborah Lyons, warns the country is heading towards catastrophe as she calls on the Taliban to cease fire on major cities immediately.
An opportunity to demonstrate the commitment of the UN Security Council and the regional and international community that you represent to prevent Afghanistan from descending into a situation of catastrophe so serious that it would have few, if any, parallels in this century. To attack urban areas is to knowingly inflict enormous harm and cause massive civilian casualties. Nonetheless, the threatening of large urban areas appears to be a strategic decision by the Taliban, who have accepted the likely carnage that will ensue. Afghanistan National Security and Defense Forces are defending these cities. But this defense will also undoubtedly cause civilian casualties.
Airstrikes have damaged a health clinic and a high school in the capital of Afghanistan's Helmand province. A defense ministry statement confirmed the airstrikes were carried out in parts of the city of Lashkar Gah. It said forces target Taliban positions, killing 54 fighters and wounding 23 others. A Taliban surge has intensified as U.S. and NATO troops wrap up their withdrawal from the country. As Taliban attacks increase, Afghan security forces and government troops have a strike with airstrikes supported by the United States. The fighting has raised growing concerns about civilian casualties.
It was around 10:30 p.m. when the airstrike happened. The ward called and told me that the school had caught fire. Come to school.
The UN Security Council has called for a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon amid rising tensions in the common border. The UN's peacekeeping mission's head in Lebanon, Stefano Del Col, urged the Lebanese and Israeli armed forces to use the coordination mechanisms between the three parties to avoid an escalation of violence. Del Col chaired a meeting with officers from both sides and urged them to find ways to strengthen border security. Several people have been injured during the attack. Local authorities have asked residents of northern Galilee to stay inside their bomb shelters until further notice.
Escalatory developments, including rocket fire into Israel and airstrikes and artillery fire in response across the Blue Line in recent days. We call on all parties to exercise utmost restraint and maintain stability. Lebanon cannot afford another crisis. It is paramount that all actors involved avoid actions that can further heighten tensions and lead to miscalculation. UNIFIL's head of mission and force commander, Major General Stefano Del Col, is in direct contact with the parties. He calls on everyone to immediately cease fire. This is a very dangerous situation with escalatory action seen on both sides over the past 2 days.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has received the Libyan Transitional Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Beybe in Istanbul on Saturday. The meeting between both leaders lasted an hour and a half and later attended a meeting between delegations from the two countries. Turkey and Libya have seen closer ties in recent years, especially after the signing of security and maritime boundary pacts in November 2019, and after Turkey came to the aid of the legitimate Libyan government to help push back a coup attempt. Israel has conducted an overnight airstrike in Gaza that damaged olive trees. The olive trees function on a socio-economic level. It is a source of income for farmers and provides security for future generations to ensure that they will have consistent income as well. Olive trees carry more than an economic significance in the lives of Palestinians. They are not just like any other trees. They are symbolic of Palestinians' attachment to their land because the trees are drought resistant and grow under poor soil conditions. They represent Palestinian resistance and resilience.
My children and I were sleeping in the house, and suddenly we heard the pounding and the rockets. And we came here running and found the leaves destroyed and the land also. We did nothing against them, and the situation is calm since the last war. Even the resistance did not do anything towards them.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Hundreds of protesters have taken to the streets across France on Saturday for the fourth weekend in a row to rally against a new health pass. From Monday, the health pass will be needed to eat in a restaurant or enjoy a drink in a cafe, both indoors and on a terrace. It will be obligatory on intercity transport, including high-speed trains and domestic flights, although will not be needed on metro systems and suburban transport. The new rules, endorsed by President Emmanuel Macron, make it obligatory to have either a full course of vaccination against COVID-19, be in possession of a negative test, or be recently recovered from the virus to enjoy common day activities.
I protest against the health pass and especially the disguised mandatory vaccination. Personally, at my age, I don't care. But for my 18-year-old daughter, it is out of the question. If they want her to be vaccinated, she needs to have the choice of the vaccine. A traditional one, maybe. But the Pfizer, that it is still in a trial phase, it is out of the question. And apart from that, it's an incredible blow to our fundamental freedoms, so I don't agree.
Meanwhile, in Italy, hundreds have rallied in Rome against a COVID-19 Green Pass. The Green Pass, which is an extension of the European Union's digital COVID certificate, is not required to enter cinemas, museums, indoor swimming pools, or sports stadiums, as well as eat indoors at restaurants. 3 large wildfires have burned across Greece, with one threatening several towns and cutting Evia, the country's second largest island, in half. Over 1,000 people have been evacuated by ferries from a seaside village and beaches on the island of Evia, popular with holidaymakers and campers, after flames from a massive wildfire burning for days cut off all other means of escape. For the 4th consecutive day, Greece's firefighting forces have been stretched to the limit. The government has appealed for help through the European Union's emergency support system, and firefighters and aircraft have arrived from France, Ukraine, Cyprus, Croatia, Sweden, and Israel.
This disaster that has taken place is terrible. From what I see, the fire has reached up to Lake Marathon. I am afraid that possibly our great-grandchildren will be able to walk here again. It's a huge disaster.
Meanwhile, wildfires in Russia's Siberia region has endangered several villages and prompted authorities to evacuate residents of some areas. Officials have reported that in northeastern Siberia, 93 active forest fires burned across 1.1 million hectares of Shaka Yakutia, making it the worst affected region of Russia. The Defense Ministry has deployed 120 military engineers to fight the fire in the region. In recent years, Russia has recorded high temperatures that many scientists regard as a result of climate change.
During the day, we distinguished 11 fires in the overall square of more than 50,000 hectares and have located 9 fires at the square of more than 39,000 hectares.
China's executive power has rejected the United States' interference into the Hong Kong and Taiwan regions. President Xi Jinping criticized Joe Biden's announcement that he will grant asylum to Hong Kong nationals temporarily in the United States, while affirming that they are afraid to return, alleging a suspected repression by China. After the approval of the national security law for Hong Kong, Xi Jinping recalled that the law is aimed at a group of people who are trying to endanger stability in Hong Kong and who have repeatedly called for foreign interventions. He also denounced the use of human rights issues by the United States and the UK to interfere in the internal affairs of China, and said that he will take the necessary measures to defend the sovereignty and integrity of his country. The United Kingdom has surpassed 6 million COVID-19 infections since the pandemic began, with almost 32,000 new infections reported in the last 24 hours. Health authorities also reported that at least 92 people died in the last hours, taking the number of deaths due to the virus to more than 131,000. Still, experts say current figures could indicate that the pandemic is beginning to descend in the country. For government advisors, the apparent reduction of the new wave of COVID-19 is the result of the success of the vaccination campaign. The World Health Organization called on all nations to include people with HIV as priority groups for COVID-19 vaccination. The WHO coordinator for HIV Prevention and Care Department, Hepatitis and Sexually Transmitted Disease, Meg Doherty, stated that people living with the virus should be included in the priority groups for coronavirus vaccination. According to WHO authorities, hospitalization of people with HIV who have been infected with COVID-19 have increased by 30%. Therefore, people with HIV should have priority in the vaccination. In the United States, Louisiana's chief public health officer has announced that about 1% of the state's entire population has become infected with COVID-19 over the past 2 weeks. For the fourth day, Louisiana set new coronavirus hospitalization records. The State Department of Health reported 2,421 people were in hospitals around the state with COVID-19, more than 8 times the number hospitalized at the beginning of July. Louisiana has confirmed thousands of new coronavirus cases each day, driven by the highly contagious Delta variant. According to data from the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, Louisiana is averaging 653 COVID-19 infections for every 100,000 residents.
Particularly Dr. Klein. Line up front here is that there's no real good news in here. We continue to set new records for the amount of COVID that circulates in our communities, and we continue to not yet see any tangible signs that we are turning a corner. And that, quite frankly, is terrifying. We have more children sick with COVID-19 than at any other time during the pandemic. And as we heard from hospital leaders on Monday, particularly Dr. Klein, the pediatrician from Children's Hospital in New Orleans, the Delta variant is affecting children at a greater rate than during the surges that we saw previously.
And we have more stories coming up after one last break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The Cuban government has received a donation of food and other supplies from Nicaragua to face the pandemic. The ship Augusto Cesar Sandino was received by the Cuban Minister of Science, Technology and Environment, Elba Perez, at the port of Mariel on Friday. The donation consists of 30 containers of food supplies to help the Cuban government face the COVID-19 pandemic and to mitigate the effects of the economic, commercial and financial blockade imposed by the United States. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez expressed his gratitude on behalf of the government and people of Cuba for the gesture of solidarity of the Nicaraguan government led by President Daniel Ortega. Thousands of homes have been damaged in Sudan after torrential rains caused heavy flooding, with many streets in the capital Khartoum deep in water. Heavy rains usually fall in Sudan from June to October, and the country faces severe flooding every year, wrecking properties, infrastructure, and crops. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said around 12,000 people have been affected, over 800 homes have reportedly been destroyed, and over 4,000 homes damaged. Last year, heavy rains forced Sudan to declare a 3-month state of emergency after flooding affected at least 600,000 people.
We woke up in the morning to the rain, and we found water at the edge of the door of the house. We went out into the neighborhood and found the sewage system blocked in more than one place.
The autumn season is known to us for the rain. People must prepare for the autumn season. The rains come suddenly like a contract. At any moment, it may rain. The municipality must be prepared, at least from last March, and be ready in May, for example. Yesterday, the weather was clear until 3 o'clock in the morning, and then suddenly clouds gathered and it rained.
One of the Nigerian schoolgirls kidnapped by Boko Haram militants more than 7 years ago is free and has been reunited with her family. Borno State Governor Bubagana Umara Sulum said in a statement that Ruth Ngadar Pogu surrendered to the military last month, along with a person she said she had married. Nearly 300 schoolgirls, most aged between 12 and 17, were abducted by Boko Haram in April 2014 from Chibok in northeast Nigeria, sparking an international outcry and to bring back our girls campaign for their release. Nearly 1,000 students have been snatched in mass abductions since December, mostly in the country's northwestern and central states. Most have been released, but some are still being held after months in captivity.
I thank God to be able to see my daughter alive 7 years after she was kidnapped in school. I'm really happy and would like to thank the Borno State government and the military. May God bring the remaining ones.
South Africa has started vaccinating homeless people, one of the country's most vulnerable communities, with 1 dose vaccines to ensure full protection against COVID-19. It's estimated that around 200,000 people living on South Africa's streets, which is a vulnerable community that has been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic due to the harsh outdoor environment and a higher rate of pre-existing medical conditions. The government said it will prioritize the use of the single-dose Johnson & Johnson jabs in its drive to vaccinate people living in remote, homeless, and rural communities. The homeless people in South Africa who want to be vaccinated will be able to sign up whether or not they have formal identity documents.
I don't have a place to stay. I have to struggle to eat. So the pandemic has made it very difficult for me as far as being homeless is concerned. I'm living on the streets, I'm hungry, and I needed assistance, and here they gave me the vaccine.
For homeless, we're using for J&J because it's a 1 dose. Because with the Pfizer, it means that you have to come back again 42 days. So we have to provide J&J, and I'm glad that now we'll be pushing more to be used, and also in other homeless shelters, because we don't want to bother people to come, because they will forget anyway about their return dates.
A batch of China's Sinopharm vaccines has arrived at Zambia's international airport in Lusaka. The Chinese envoy said the donation was another important embodiment of the friendship and unity of the two governments in fighting the pandemic. He hoped the donation of the vaccines will support Zambia's anti-pandemic efforts. China has recently announced that it will strive to provide 2 billion COVID-19 vaccines doses to the world throughout this year, and offer $100 million to the COVAX mechanism. The $100 million to COVAX will mainly go to the distribution of vaccines to developing countries.
We started the immunization program in April this year, and the demand for vaccines has exceeded our supply. So by having an additional lot of vaccines, it makes a difference in our vaccination program.
An intense coronavirus vaccination campaign was launched in Tunisia on Sunday. It's targeting people over age 40 and over who have not yet received a jab. 331 vaccination centers have been set up, each with a supply of more than 4,000 doses. More than 20,000 people have died from the virus in Tunisia, according to Johns Hopkins University. This is the largest operation since the launch of the national inoculation campaign in March 2021.
I'm afraid of getting sick with the coronavirus. I am short of bread and I'm afraid of the situation in the country, in our hospitals and the lack of oxygen. And as far as I'm concerned, I feel more secure with the vaccine.
I've been waiting a long time, since March, and thank God there is this walking day. I am vaccinated, and I hope God protects us.
Bangladesh has also begun a nationwide vaccination campaign against COVID-19. According to Senior Minister Mosame El-Haq, the vaccination drive from August 7th will be led by tens of thousands of health workers at 14,000 health centers. The minister also said that the nationwide lockdown in place since July 1st will be extended until August 10th. As results, shops and public transport will resume from next week, but only vaccinated shopkeepers and transport workers will be allowed to leave their homes to work. The government's goal is to vaccinate at least 10 million people in a week as the country battles a major COVID-19 surge.
I didn't come for vaccine before because I could not understand the procedure. But when I heard about this campaign on television, I came here. I would have taken vaccine long ago if I knew how to register online.
I got my vaccine by God's will. I'll be safe from coronavirus.
We come to the end of this news brief, and remember you can find this and many other stories as always in our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.